Chapter 3. Westward Bound. White lines stretched along the road in front of them. The engine of the black van strained to pull the trailer loaded with everything the Graber family needed to start a new life in Montana. As an Amish preacher, Lester wasn't driving. His friend Joe was a member of the beachy Amish church who were allowed to have cars. They used the family van to move, and Joe drove while Lester sat in the front passenger seat. They entered Wyoming from South Dakota and confronted the foothills of the Black Hills. The van struggled with its load and started to overheat. Joe's brow knit into worry lines. This van hasn't done this before. You're pulling a bigger load than usual. Lester let out a sigh. Well, yes, but I didn't think it would get hot this quick. By the time they reached Billings, Montana, the problem grew severe enough that Joe looked for a U-Haul dealer. He pulled in, parked the van, and rented a truck to continue the trip. Once on their way, Lester stared at the rugged landscape. It's a good thing you got the truck. Look how big those mountains are getting. They're bigger than I imagined, Joe admitted. As they drove into town with mountains in the background, the buildings seemed smaller than those back east. It was their first experience seeing the Rocky Mountains, and everything took on a new perspective. Doors appeared lower, and the buildings looked smaller. When they stopped at a gas station, they asked the man, "Are these buildings regular size, or are they built on a smaller scale?" The man assured them that they were built on the same scale as buildings across the United States. They sure look small, what with the mountains in the background, Lester said. Yes, Joe shook his head in disbelief. I was almost sure they were smaller, but I guess that guy knows what he's talking about. Joe stroked his beard as he took it all in. If these hills are this big compared to the buildings, no wonder my van overheated. No doubt, Lester nodded. Even the water is different. The miles wore on, and Lester's thoughts drifted to the past, to his first move. It was 1965, and he was 7 years old. His family moved from Middlebury, Indiana, to Clark, Missouri. The moon seemed so bright that night on the train. Although his mother told him it was the same moon they saw in Indiana, he wasn't sure he could believe her. Lester spent all of his school days in Missouri. That's where his mother was buried after she died of cancer in 1969. Middlebury, Indiana, Clark, Missouri, Bronson, Michigan, then back to Indiana, this time in LaGrange County. These were the places he lived as he grew up. 4 Amish communities. 4 different levels of conservatism and rules. How did it all fit? After getting married, he and his family lived in other Amish communities. Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas, Michigan, then Tennessee again. All with different rules. All convinced they were right. Questions from his boyhood nagged him. Maybe I'll find answers in Montana. He was glad to be moving again, excited by the possibilities. As they traveled on, miles of water came into view. The sign said it was Flathead Lake. Look at that water, Lester said. What makes it so bluish-green? Maybe it's not muddy like we were used to seeing back in Missouri, Joe said. By the time they came through Kalispell and Whitefish, they grew more accustomed to the mountains. But as they traveled north toward the Tobacco Valley around Eureka, one sight after another still amazed them. Rising as a backdrop from the valley floor, the Whitefish Range on the right reached to the sky. Very tall, especially to these Midwesterners who were used to large, flat fields of corn that stretched for miles. A hill in Puxico, Missouri was a slight rise in the road compared to these mountains. West Kootenai Valley. Rebecca sang softly under her breath. She sang the words of a well-known hymn. She sang about the woods and forests. She sang about the birds and trees. She even sang about the streams and mountains. Rebecca worshipped God, her Savior, and praised him for his greatness. She changed a word here and there to fit her mood at the moment, as she watched the mountains come nearer and nearer. When they pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, she watched Joe and Lester walk inside and marveled that the doorway was tall enough for her husband to enter without stooping. Her senses struggled to adjust to her surreal surroundings. She was awed by the grandeur of the mountains and the beauty of the West. Even more so, she was overwhelmed by the step they were taking. Rebecca felt like a pioneer, venturing into the unknown, leaving behind family and all things known and familiar. They didn't know anybody in Montana. The letters they had exchanged with the men on the Kootenai were the only tangible connection they had with anyone in this part of the country. She didn't know of any Amish settlement farther west than Kansas. This settlement being so far removed from the other Amish settlements, maybe, just maybe, they will be different. Hopefully they will be more spiritual, living here in the mountains and closer to God. The men walked back to the truck and said they had another 30-mile drive to get to their destination. 30 more miles, then I'll have to meet strangers and be friendly. She loved traveling in spite of car sickness, but she dreaded meeting people. Her husband had the knack of never meeting a stranger, and she was thankful for that. He always knew what to say and made friends quickly. Although that could have its drawbacks too, she thought to herself as they pulled back onto the road. She thought about his friendliness with the beachy Amish. One of the reasons she had so readily agreed to come west was that it felt safer to get away from those beachy Amish people with whom Lester had become so friendly. Yes, many things in the Amish church troubled her. Many things she wished were different. But the things that bothered her most in the Amish church were in the beachy church too, just on a different level. Rebecca was glad she could honor her father by staying with the old ways. Besides, she loved the Amish lifestyle with its horses and buggies. It was just some of the unscriptural practices that bothered her.